Hello and welcome to the Budget Scrambler Build episode 10. So last time we rebuilt the bike, we got it to this stage. Today we're going to be sorting out a few odd jobs, but most importantly we're going to paint the tank and the side panels. So last time I explained to you the paint job I wanted to go for and also all the woes that this fuel tank has caused me. I've carried on cracking away with it and I think I've got it to the stage where it's going to be acceptable. So what I need to do now is prepare both the tank and the side panels for their coat of satin black. So what I'm going to do for that is I'm going to use a fine grit wet and dry paper and get this finish nice and smooth before I lay on the black. So I've got my 2500 grit wet and dry paper, and I've got this flat shaper. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap the shaper in the paper and sand the tank that way. If you were to use your hand or something soft, it will profile itself into any little imperfections and actually make them worse. So it's much better to use something flat, and I'm going to smooth out both the tank and the side panels. So I've been across with my wet and dry paper. It's come out pretty alright. I think we'll get away with those tank repairs. What it does do is it leaves this nasty residue on there. And that's going to be something we need to remove so that the paint's going to adhere to that layer. So what would be best to use would be a paint prep wipe, but I haven't got one of those, so I'm going to use just some kitchen towel and some alcohol. And the reason I'm going satin black is because the majority of it will be black. I'm going to be building the silver and the white off of it. I'm sure there are better ways of going about this. I personally don't really do many pristine paint jobs. I like to ride bikes that look old. So this is not my favourite job, but I think it's going to come out well, and I think, you know, for Ellie's reaction, it'll be really worth it. So now I've got the tank and the side panels all cleaned off. They're dodgily hung from the rafters, which means they're ready to go for paint. So I'm going to mix up my 2K and I'm going to spray them in the same manner that I did with the frame and the rest of the parts. So now I've got my black paint drying, I need to be getting on with something else. And the first thing I'm going to do is fill the bike with oil. When I had the engine out to polish up the aluminium, I drained it all out, so we need to replace that. The other thing I'm going to do is put on the new chain and sprockets. The old chain was a little bit rusty, it was kind of seized in places, and the sprockets were at the end of their life. So it's much better to replace them. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Once I've done that, I'll also be able to link up the back brake as well. Right, so now my tank and my side panels are dry. It's time to start masking it off for the silver paint. I'm pretty out of my comfort zone here. I don't really like doing this sort of thing. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the pinstriping tape to mark off the oval section on the tank and also on the number boards, and then I'm going to apply a coat of silver paint. So the silver paint has dried now, and I'm quite pleased with how it's looking. It's come out pretty nice. Unfortunately, I've been having a lot of trouble with the black paint not setting properly. It's very cold and it's very, very damp, and I've tried to heat the workshop, but it doesn't seem to be making a difference. Where I've masked it off, it seems that the masking tape has sort of eaten into it a little bit, so I'm hoping that I'll be able to sand that out with some very fine grit sandpaper. And for that reason, I've decided to do the rest of the painting with can-based spray paint. So the other thing I've realised is I should have masked off an area here so that I had a black stripe to paint my white checkerboards on top of, but I didn't. So I'm going to mask that off now and use a can of black spray paint to just spray that on. Well, that didn't go to plan. I left the silver to dry for nearly 2 days, and in spite of that, when I've peeled off the masking tape, it's actually peeled off sections of the silver. You might be able to see that, you might not be able to. So yeah, this paint job is fighting me every bit of the way. I have done a pristine paint job before. It wasn't fun. I don't know why I'm trying to do it again. I spoke to Ellie a couple of days ago, and she said she was worried that if it was pristine, she'd be worried about dropping it whilst we were green laning and stuff like that. I think the best thing to do is to overcome and adapt. I'm going to stop fighting it and I'm going to embrace it. Now we're going to do what I do best, which is make a bad paint job. I think what we'll try and do is we'll go with the colour scheme. We'll keep it as we planned, but just make it look a little bit more rough and ready, a little bit more used, and give it some charm instead of it just looking like a cheap, nasty paint job. So the only thing I can do really is to mask it off and continue with the checkerboard, the white, and then I guess we'll start rubbing it back and aging it a little bit, making it look a little bit more rough and ready. So I've removed all of my masking tape and I've got these. Now at the moment these look a little bit cheap and nasty. We need to do something about that. When I was removing the masking tape, obviously it's still chipped. I was less careful with it this time because I think the chips will actually help us achieve an older looking paint job. Chips happen over time. It's just something I've managed to do in a matter of seconds. So the next thing you need to do is make these look a little less cheap, and just dye them back a little bit. So I'm going to use some fine grit sandpaper and go over it all and create some scratches, create some faded areas, and really just play around with it until I'm happy. And that's one of the reasons I like this stage so much, because it's just a matter of experimenting. You don't know what it will look like, you just know it's going to look cool. So yeah, I'm just going to play around with it until I'm happy, and at a stage where it's convincing. So I've just finished, I suppose, the weathering process, and I'm quite pleased now. I think I've managed to bring it back from what has been a disaster. If you've learned anything from today's episode, it's don't ever get me to paint your bike. But yeah, I think it's come out pretty well. The tank is looking pretty good as well. I haven't taken it too far. I think when we put it on, it's going to look smart. I haven't actually tried it yet, so you'll be seeing it at the same time as I am. The important thing is that Ellie likes it, and the jury is out on that, so fingers crossed. But I think she will. If it gives her the confidence to ride it and not worry about dropping it, then that's all that matters, I think. It will be nice for her to have alter ego to her immaculate 75 CB 125. So yeah, I think she will be pleased. Well, I have to say I'm quite pleased with that, especially given that nothing really went to plan. I think we really made the best of a bad situation, and it's come out for the better. Projects seem to guide themselves sometimes, and either this guided it or my lack of experience did, and I think it might be the latter. But I think Ellie's going to be pleased. It will certainly look nice next to my rusty old bikes. I think it's got classic styling, and it looks aggressive enough as well. So fingers crossed that Ellie will be pleased. So it's looking pretty good now. The only thing is it doesn't run yet. I haven't started it up since we put it back together because there's no wiring loom in it. There's no cables. Things like that need to be sorted. So next week's episode is going to cover that. I hate wiring nearly as much as I hate painting. But hopefully I can share with you a few things that make life easier and make you feel like you're in control of the wiring. So, thanks very much for watching. I hope you've learned something. I have. And hopefully I'll see you next week when I'll take you through getting this thing running again.